and really sit down and read through One Nation Under Blackmail, the 2 volumes that were so well put together by Whitney Webb. Okay? Let me know if you've read either of those volumes or both. Put that in the chat. Let me know. And like I said, 2 volumes here. We're talking 1,300 pages plus of content and details, really diving in. Easily probably one of the most important investigative works written in our time to truly give the details about the history of how America's operated. But here's the problem, okay? Almost no one reads the full 2 volumes. There's some people that love to read and they can get through it quickly, but most people don't. And it's not because it isn't powerful, but it's because most people simply don't have the time, okay? Especially in the world that we live in today. So what I want to do here in this 1-hour segment that we have together is I want to kick off the show here by at least tapping into a portion of it. And what I want to do is walk you through the expose that these books contain. A straight line, if you will, through the story about how our government, chat, from the 1940s up until today has always been governed not by law, but by blackmail. And by the time that we're wrapped up with this whole thing today, by the time we're finished and we're completed, you're going to see that this system has never really changed, ever. The names change a little bit here and there between the different agencies, companies, the technology might evolve, but the method, leverage through secrets, has always been the foundation of this whole thing, and that's what you call blackmail. So let's start from the top, chat, here as we tap into this segment. I want to talk about the origin of the system. Okay, something called Operation Underworld. And in order to truly understand this, we got to pop back over to 1942. We're talking about the World War II era. German U-boats basically are patrolling the Atlantic, sinking some American merchant ships right off the coast. Supply lines are being threatened by this whole thing. The docks in New York that are critical to this infrastructure, without them, the war effort essentially collapses. And so the U.S. Naval Intelligence suspects sabotage on the docks. But here's the problem. The docks that they were wanting to go and find out about and try to patrol and do all this stuff, these were controlled at the time by the mafia. Okay, the Italian mafia. So you have Luciano's men, Lansky's network, these unions, if you will, and it was their territory. No one could touch it, not even the U.S. Naval Intelligence. So what did the Navy do? Did they send in the FBI? Did they seize control? No, they didn't do that. They decided instead to cut a deal with the mob. And they coined this deal Operation Underworld. And I'm not kidding. You can look this up. So in exchange for the cooperation and for the intelligence on Nazi activity that the mob was giving to the U.S. Naval Intelligence, Charles or Lucky Luciano would be given favors, which amounted to reduced prison time. We're talking better conditions and eventually a path to freedom that he was able to garner. And the partnership worked. The docks, in fact, were secured. Ships were able to move cargo safely. But something much bigger in this whole situation happened in the shadows of this. The U.S. government began to discover that how useful this organized crime could actually be. And organized crime discovered how much leverage in return that they could gain over the U.S. government, because once you cross that line, okay, once you officially link the intelligence world to the underworld, if you will, you don't go back. And so from that moment on, these mobsters, this mafia-related personnel, they weren't just criminals. They became assets to the U.S. government. And the mob didn't just bring muscle. They brought something even more valuable to the table. And that was secrets. Secrets of who visited brothels. You're talking about secrets of who owed major gambling debts. You're talking about secrets of politicians and very high-profile businessmen. And that was the first great turning point, if you will. America's government at that moment realized that blackmail wasn't just some weapon. It was a governing strategy that could be used. And so this partnership that they developed, the U.S. government with the mafia, would become what would be known as the backbone of U.S. power for decades. Okay? And that brings us to our second point in this whole thing, which I guess we can call the architects of compromise. We're talking about Rosenstiel, we're talking about Hoover, we're talking about Roy Cohn. So if Operation Underworld was the birth in the 1940s, 1942 namely, then in 1950 and in the 1950s were we could consider that to be the adolescence, right? Where blackmail actually grew teeth. But let's start with the top of this, Louis Rosenstiel. He was a liquor magnate who had essentially built his empire during the Prohibition era. And on the surface, he was a respectable businessman. But behind the scenes, he was tied directly to Meyer Lansky's underworld network. Now, Rosenstiel's empire wasn't just about selling liquor. It was about selling influence. His parties were, extremely infamous. The guy was known for this stuff. He was filled all the time in these party settings with politicians. You're talking celebrities, and then very young companions. I'm talking very young companions. Cameras were always rolling. Files were always being kept. And who did Rosenstiel mentor underneath him? He mentored a guy by the name of Roy Cohn. Cohn was Joseph McCarthy's right-hand man during the Red Scare. But his real career wasn't about communists. It was about leverage. Roy Cohn built what he called and coined as the favor bank. Okay? And here's how this whole thing worked. You would attend one of Roy Cohn's parties. Maybe you drank a little bit too much. Right? Maybe you met someone that you shouldn't and you did a couple things that you weren't supposed to. Maybe there are cameras hidden in the walls. And by the next morning, you don't just have a hangover, you have an account in Roy Cohn's favor bank. And Cohn, he never forgot who owed him something. So it wasn't just about money, it was absolutely about control. And so now let's kind of bring in the FBI into this because we have the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover. And for nearly 50 years, Hoover was the most important unelected man in America. But Hoover had his own secrets. And rumors began to swirl about his private life, about compromising photographs. And Roy Cohn was said to have known about all of this. They said the mob knew. And Hoover never touched Lansky's casinos. He never touched Roy Cohn's circles because Hoover himself, they say, was compromised. And these guys had leverage over him. And that's the key lesson in this. Blackmail works best at the top. You compromise the watchdog and the entire system basically is yours to command and do whatever you want with them. You become the top of that system. And if you remember this, a young real estate developer by the name of Donald J. Trump actually grew up, they say, under Roy Cohn's mentorship. Trump later said that Roy was my mentor. Donald Trump actually said this out of his own mouth. And this is not a knock to him. This is just details to provide you some of the historical context behind who these figures are. And the one lesson that Cohn drilled into his underhands, if you will, the people who were learning from him, was very simple. He says, never fight fair. Always figure out a way to have leverage. And so from Hoover to Cohn, from Rosenstiel to Trump, the real foundation of American power, they say, was not justice, but that it was compromise. So then let's kind of tap into the third part of this because we know it always comes down to money. We can talk about the global banking web. Okay? from Rosenbaum to what's known as the BCCI. So while Roy Cohn was building his favor bank in New York City, another kind of favor bank, if you will, was being built overseas. A guy by the name of Tibor Rosenbaum in Switzerland ran the International Credit Bank. And officially, it was a legitimate financial institution, but in reality, it laundered mafia money. We're talking at mafia, laundered CIA cash. We're talking Mossad funds and more, MI6, etc. And a guy by the name of Bruce Rappaport ran another offshore bank out of the Caribbean called the Inter-Maritime Bank. And it was serving a dual role. So banks like these two basically became the financial plumbing for blackmail operations. You're talking offshore accounts, shell companies, denials built into the paperwork, if you will. And then came the monster out of all of this, which is known as BCCI, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. And BCCI was coined as the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, is what they used to call it. It laundered billions of dollars for drug cartels. We're talking terrorist organizations, we're talking dictatorships, and even these intelligence agencies. And here's the thing, everyone knew about it. The CIA used it, Mossad used it, MI6 used it, all these places and agencies used this, and investigators who got too close called it the octopus. Because they said this thing had tentacles everywhere. Politics, you're talking business, organized crime, intelligence. And actually, one journalist by the name of Danny Casolaro, I believe it was, died while he was investigating the BCCI. He was found in a hotel bathtub with his wrists slashed, and his death was ruled a suicide. But his notes went missing. His work that he had compiled together and all this investigative work, completely unfinished, disappeared off the face of the earth. And that's how dangerous this type of web was. And the lesson of the BCCI was simple. Blackmail and covert finance were not exemptions. They were the operating system of global power. And so by the 1980s, chat, blackmail wasn't just about photographs or bank accounts. It went to move to a digital space. And this is where we start to enter some familiar names who you might know, like Robert Maxwell, publishing tycoon, British MP, socialite. He was a spy and obviously the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. So Robert Maxwell became the key distributor of a piece of software called PROMIS. It was called the Prosecutor's Management Information System, is what it was short for. And originally it was designed to help the U.S. prosecutors manage cases. PROMIS was actually developed and then it was modified with secret backdoors in it. And whoever controlled those secret backdoors could essentially spy on the institutions using it. So Maxwell helped to distribute this PROMIS software to governments. You're talking banks around the world, Canada, Israel, South Africa, intelligence services all over the place, police, etc. It was the perfect Trojan horse. And so with this PROMIS software, kompromat went industrial. So instead of compromising individuals one at a time and having to wait and see how things play out, entire governments essentially could be compromised at scale by instituting this PROMIS software. And so when Robert Maxwell eventually and mysteriously fell from his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in 1991, his empire crumbled, but his legacy continued to live on through his daughter. And it was because his daughter Ghislaine essentially inherited not just his wealth, but his connections. She would soon partner with who we now know as public enemy number one, Jeffrey Epstein. And that leads us down a whole other angle here. I guess you can call it the favor bank 2.0. Jeffrey Epstein makes his rise here. His rise was no mistake unless you understand the system behind it. College dropout, Speaking of Jeffrey Epstein, a brief teaching job at the Dalton School, hired by Donald Barr, who was a former OSS officer, OSS being the precursor to the CIA. Then he went into Bear Stearns, then out, and then suddenly into personal finance, and he became the personal finance manager for billionaire Leslie Wexner of L Brands, Victoria's Secret, things of that nature. That's what Wexner owns and is associated with. So Les Wexner, gave Epstein something unheard of. He gave this college dropout teacher who just happened to stumble into finance, he gave him the power of attorney. He gave him the legal right to sign his checks, to manage his properties, and to control his entire financial empire, which is unheard of. Why would a billionaire give a man with no degree, no pedigree, and a murky past that much type of power? It was because Epstein wasn't just some money manager, chat. He was an asset manager of secrets. He was a master of leverage and blackmail. And so Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, a gift from Leslie Wexner, became a surveillance hub for him. His island in the Virgin Islands, Epstein Island, Little St. James. His Palm Beach mansion, his New Mexico ranch, all wired with cameras and all staffed to manage guests. And who were these guests? Well, politicians, business moguls, we're talking scientists, we're talking royalty, and obviously very, very young women. We're talking even children. And so Epstein didn't just exploit. He recorded, he archived, and he collected leverage nonstop. We're talking Prince Andrew, we're talking Bill Clinton, we're talking scientists from Harvard and MIT, powerful names who could never afford exposure because of their position, who they were, what they were involved in. That's why Epstein was untouchable for so long. Prosecutors in 2008 gave him a slap on the wrist. In 2019, he was arrested again, but never even made it to trial because exposing Epstein would fully mean that it would expose the entire system. And then here's the most important part of this whole thing. The system didn't end with Epstein. It evolved. Robert Maxwell used PROMIS to backdoor governments. Epstein used cameras to compromise elites. Today, it's software like Palantir Technologies, founded by Peter Thiel, funded by the CIA's venture arm In-Q-Tel. Palantir integrates everything, your financial transactions, your social media, emails, travel records, your health data. So what used to be kompromat on individuals is now kompromat on entire populations. Epstein compromised elites. Palantir compromises everyone. And that's the type of world that we live in right now. And so anyway, with respect to Whitney Webb's 2 volumes of her book, One Nation Under Blackmail, 1,300 pages, the expose that I'm giving to you, I decided to take it a step further and actually create a summary guide for you guys specifically that I just released on my website so that you can quickly get to the names, details, all of the information that's important to you. And I want to show you the commercial on that right now so you can get your copy of this. Check this out. Vantes Point members, listen to me close. Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail is one of the most important investigative works ever written. 2 volumes, over 1,300 pages, documenting how America has always been governed by blackmail, from the mob's pact with the U.S. intelligence in World War II, to Roy Cohn's favor bank, to Epstein Island, and now to Palantir in the age of digital surveillance. But let's be honest, most people are never going to read 1,300 pages of these 2 incredible volumes, and that's why I created the Blackmail Blueprint. It's my latest ebook, and it's the clearest, most direct breakdown of Whitney Webb's research. I'm talking about all the names, the networks, the methods, condensed into one guide that you can quickly and easily absorb in real time. And I just released it for digital download, so you can get it instantly when you order on my site, joeyvantes.com. You're gonna get it both in PDF and EPUB formats. That means you can read it right away on your phone, your tablet, your Kindle, any book app that you have, you can read it right there. So if you ever wanted to understand how power really works in this country, this is where you need to start. Here's how you get it, chat. Right now, go to my website that should be in the chat or the description, joeyvantes.com. Scroll down to my merch. Click on the first option, which is the Blackmail Blueprint ebook. What you're going to do is click on the purchase button here on the page, and once you do so, you can put in your email, your payment details, and you are going to get the instant download available to you in both the PDF and the EPUB format. My book, The Blackmail Blueprint, rips the veil off America's darkest secret. We've never been governed by law, but by blackmail. And it's based on Whitney Webb's groundbreaking One Nation Under Blackmail in a tight, condensed format, giving you the information you want right now. If you ever felt that something is deeply wrong with this system in our nation, you're right. It isn't broken, it's built this way intentionally. So click on the link, pick up your copy today, support the movement here at the Vontes Point, read the Blackmail Blueprint today before it's too late. Now let's get back to the show. And chat, as I mentioned to you here, so that way you guys can pick that up. Like I said, it's on my site. It's live right now. Actually, going live right here to you guys while we're here during our show today. So look, do me a favor. This is how you support the movement. This is how we fund this thing. And I think other than that, it's just a great way to deep dive into the specifics, the details of all of this information pertaining to Epstein, pertaining to blackmail, pertaining to the historical foundations of how this all occurred, how this has been used, and how it's been funneled and laddered up from the focus of just individual blackmail to what we've seen now in our day and age, in our space, to a high-level blackmail system that is being done on a very much more sophisticated level. It used to be one person at a time. Now it's being exposed through Palantir, Gideon, and the various forms of these softwares that are going into blackmail operations, that are going into data collection and surveillance at a scale that we've never seen before in history. And so thank you to producer Eli. He's pinned it up in the chat. It is right there. You can get my new book. If you simply click on that link, you'll get directly to my website and you can pick up a copy of that. If you're watching this on YouTube, that will also be pinned for you there as well. So you can take advantage of that right there on the website, joeyvontes.com. Again, joeyvontes.com will get you directly to that there. Now,